welcome to a brand new episode of Agile TD Mondays. Today, I'm more than just delighted to announce my guest today. Last year, she was a new voice at the ATD's 2016, and this year she's going to be one of our keynote speakers. Please welcome Ash Coleman. Hi, Ash.
Hi, how's it going?
Fine. Thanks for being with me.
Of course, it's a pleasure. I'm calling in from San Francisco this morning. It's bright and early, and I'm excited to be here as well. So for those who don't know me, again, my name is Ash Coleman. You can find me on Twitter at ashcoleman30. I'm an engineering manager for Credit Karma here in San Francisco, as well as a consultant, and I've been testing for a number of years. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about some of the experiences that I've had with explaining to business and stakeholders how the testing process is carried about. Sometimes it's interesting how we have all had this situation where we don't know necessarily how to explain what it is that we're doing. And it may not be that we don't know how to explain it, but some people may not be familiar enough with the testing process to understand what it is that we're doing. Sometimes it's just as easy as explaining technology in business terms. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. In my experience, time and time over, that when I'm working on a project that is due or has a launch date, especially towards the end or sometimes when we're getting close to crunch time and things need to be launched, business loses sight of what is necessary within testing in order for a project to be considered launchable or available to go forward. Perhaps they've overlooked maybe the estimations that we've had within the entire process, or maybe they've only seen those estimations carried out in development. And so it becomes a little bit cloudy when we get to the end of the rope, how long it's going to take to get these testing practices completed. And so this is what I'm speaking about today, how to potentially get over that bridge and make it a little bit more transparent for business so that they feel a little bit more comfortable about the time that it's taking and the information that's being passed over from testers. So the first thing I would say is that providing clarity is your biggest advocate. Again, oftentimes people don't understand what it means when a ticket has just reached testing and maybe you're pressed up against time. It's a very difficult situation to be in as a tester, and I've been in it countless times, where people will come to you and they'll maybe tap on your desk and say, hey, is this ticket ready to go? Are we ready to launch? Can we put this into effect today? When are you going to be done? And these are very stressful questions as a tester, especially when you're just trying to do your best to get things done and make sure that you're not missing anything major when it comes to producing code into production. So I've noticed that when I work on teams that might have either one tester or maybe testers who are newer in the industry, that explaining exactly what's going on in this process can be a little bit difficult. There are an abundance of amazing materials out there from people such as Elizabeth Hendrickson, James Bach, a number of amazing blogs talking about heuristics within the testing community, and things that can kind of guide a conversation when it comes to understanding what it is that testers do. So how do we utilize these materials to gain clarity? Sometimes we just have to take the time to sit and explain what these words actually mean, what these processes mean in terms of business. In other words, when you have a ticket and it just reaches testing, instead of saying, oh, well, this is going to take one day, breaking it down and saying, I'm actually going to test in this manner for this amount of time so that people understand the language that you use when you're speaking about testing. I found that when you empower people with the language so that they can understand the process, they feel a lot more comfortable when it comes to hearing these estimates and knowing that there's work behind them, instead of it being ambiguous words that are being utilized and people don't necessarily know what sort of time or effort goes into that degree of testing. And so leaning on these materials and maybe even adding your own language to them so that you can communicate best to business about it is going to be a really effective tool in providing some clarity for everyone who's involved. This alone has others thinking more in terms of testing and can begin to expand their mind as to the intricacies involved in the test plan. With this clarity, people then have an insight or a window into what it is that you're doing. Very helpful. This also provides an opportunity to speak the same language or to create a common documentation language. Once you have empowered those on your team and other stakeholders with the language around testing, it is now time to put it in writing. There are documents and documents within projects that define what it is that is taking place with each stage of development and testing. In my personal experience, it has been very helpful for me to inform those whom are on the team of the tools that I'm using to test. Again, providing more clarity for them, but utilizing a language that we are now all under the same impression of its effort. When working on a newer team, or you are in addition to an existing team, there can be confusion around the way you communicate about testing. Scrum language or actual heuristics can be foreign words for some people. So helping others understand how you interpret solutions to business needs with a common jargon will give others a better idea as to what is meant by your terms. This, again, is another helpful tool that can help people really understand and realize what's going on in testing. So instead of saying something that will be ambiguous when you explain it to a team member, you can break it down and even show them by way of pair testing or mob testing the way that this process is actually being carried out. This language continues to build, and hopefully over time, people's comfort level again will be higher so that when you're speaking to business or stakeholders about testing matters or about a project, especially in those times that are getting close to launch, they feel a little bit more secure about your expertise in the matter, but also about the time it's going to take to complete it. So creating a common ground. It's been my experience that when people, again, don't understand what it is that you're doing, it's a hard time for them to buy into this. For example, I am constantly trying to talk my friends into doing something new or exciting that I found great pleasure in doing, or maybe it's a ride at a amusement park or something of that sort. And I go on and I'm like, yes, let's do this. And the common response is usually no. The first time you explain it to them, you're like, I really want to go on this ride. It looks intimidating to them. And their response is absolutely not. So with this case, it's kind of the same thing in testing. I know amusement parks and testing are two separate things, but just think of it this way. When you're really excited about something, and we as testers usually are, it's really easy to jump over all the reasons why people should be invested and even convert them to the idea that you know what you're talking about. Going back to that amusement park analogy, sometimes these rides look really scary and they're really big and you're trying to get people on board for it. But the idea of it, the look of it is so intimidating, people's immediate response is rejection. And I feel that that's a lot of things that happen in business as well. When people see a project and you're getting towards the end, again, we're using this towards the end situation because that's usually when testers are pressed the most, or when any sort of deliverable is up. We need people to be on our team a little bit more and have a little bit more faith about what it is that we're doing. they might just see or hear you say in Scrum perhaps that this portion of testing is going to take you X amount of time. This can be a really discriminating thing to hear or information to receive because people aren't converted to the idea or understand the process of testing itself. So creating that bridge to understand what language is being utilized and converting people to the idea as well is going to really help gain exposure for the team to know what it is that you're doing, but also get them on your side so that they can help fight this battle. It's a lot easier to have everyone invested than it is only to have one person stating, oh, I need to do this, and it's going to take me this amount of time, and what this is, no one really knows about it. The more you interact with your team and the more you involve them in the process, the more ownership they're going to feel about actually completing the testing and seeing these requirements completed as a whole. So now that you're using this common language and everyone is singing the same song, so to speak, it's easy to convert them to your ideal testing plan. At certain times, people may not understand what it is that you're doing, and that's an often case. Like, you might recognize something. It's been my experience where I'll recognize something and I get really excited because I see a glitch. And so I go further in to investigate, but because people, again, don't understand necessarily what it is that I'm doing, they see it as maybe playing around with the software rather than actually testing. But it is these inquisitive times that we have with the software and the code that help us to be better testers. And so this time is very much appreciated. A couple of weeks ago, there was a presentation talking about how this time is not only time that we're investigating, but that we're learning. And this is going to take significant time in the project, but it's best utilized in the way of figuring more about the code so that you're better able to give feedback on what it is that you are delivering and have a better idea around the risks that are involved within the testing process and the delivery as a whole. So after you've converted people to your side and have advocates that are going to sit with you and maybe even discuss these matters when you're not present or fight for you when time is being skimmed off of the testing end, it's time to take that to business. I'm one slide behind, but time to take that to business. So now that you have recruited the cause, you take it to business and you speak a little bit about how this has estimated itself into time. Now, there is a lot of talk around risk assessment when it comes to testing. And the higher you get and closer you get to management, these conversations become more pertinent to provide more clarity as to what it is that you're delivering out into the public. Now, I've spoken with a few people about this risk assessment, and the reality about the Agile process is that, these Agile techniques are focusing on lowering the cost of failure. And as we're sitting here and we as testers get really involved and intricately dedicated to the code, we have a better sense of what it is that we're delivering. And the hope is that we're able to involve business in these conversations and help them to understand this is not just a matter of me learning or converting people to understand what it is that I'm doing and taking inanimate amounts of time to get through this code and test. This is now evaluating risk. Of course, we never want to be in a situation where we are going to release something into the world that has bugs. At least that's the hope. Now, that's not always the case, and chances are you will come across one problem or another once you have delivered a product. The hope is that you do it with the least amount of risk. Now, these conversations that are being had with business or with stakeholders are hopefully going to be more enlightened than they are going to be disappointing. And again, the way that that happens is by creating that common language, recruiting others to the idea, helping them understand what it is that you do, and then helping them see that all of these things are coming together to avoid the risk of producing something that could potentially enable the business. One of the things that I've learned in my experience is that if you can't explain it in technology terms, talk about it in money or talk about it in business. There is a lot of talk around the idea of quality, time, and cost, where it's you can't have them all. And so you have to make an evaluation about what it is that you're going to dedicate your time to. In these conversations with business, the hope is that you help them to see that the quality is going to come with the time. In some cases, you will have an opportunity to get through something with less time and still have maximum quality. But the reality is something's got to give in these situations. And so as you've created this common language and you're going in and you're speaking with business, helping them to understand that, yes, this might take more time and cost a little bit more, you're going to have a higher value of quality. Or maybe the reverse. If you want to launch this tomorrow, and I don't recommend it because I would say that we have at least 2 or 3 more days, then you're probably sacrificing quality. There's potential risk to deliver something into the public that's going to enable the business. And quite honestly, I don't think that that is something that business is usually willing to do. If they're okay about presenting something to the public that is going to hurt or hinder their business, then chances are the fight for quality isn't the number one concern. So as you use this language around testing and inform people of the process it's going to take, they'll have a little bit more confidence, again, in the time that it's going to take you to get to the business, to get to business that is quality and will hopefully bring more revenue rather than put people in a place where they are losing. Lastly, we're just going to talk about test. With all of this conversation that's going on and all of this explaining that's happening, and hopefully it's happening in an efficient manner where you're not spending all of your time doing it, you have the actual opportunity to test. Conversations aside, staying on task with testing is the number one thing about why this ticket hasn't moved on the board. These conversations can be timely and even costly, but I'm convinced that if you have them early and you have them directly, that people will allow you the time that you need to test. And so you can get back to doing what it is that you do best. The hope, of course, is that the quality is the highest and the time it takes is the most efficient while we're spending more time actually testing than we are doing all of these other things. When we avoid all of the other back and forth, it gives us time to really chime in on figuring out the code, testing it the most efficient way, and producing it out into the public, or delivering it in a way that has been evaluated with all the information, in the way of all the information that you've explained to the business already. And so yes, that's my advice when it comes to helping people understand how to move a ticket, or not necessarily how to move a ticket, but how to focus on what is going on in testing and bringing that to business in a way that they understand a little bit more of the value of it, rather than as a hindrance to the process or as a stall or as time wasted on just exploring what the code has to offer. If you can take the time to explain to them and to convert them to the language of testing and help them be enlightened and empowered with the process that's happening, then more people will be comfortable with the idea that you are taking sufficient time to test, and they'll be more excited about the product in the end. And that's all.
Our tutorial speakers are Sharat Birigofta, Selena DeLacy, Lisa Crispin, Gitte Clithord, Hype Shoots, Janet Gregory, Jörg Schurkes, Keith Klein, Olaf Lewitz, Kristen Neidhart, Stuart Young, Stefan Kemper, Marit Puridevi, Tony Bruce, Ray Arell, Jess Humble, Mark Windringham, and Liz Keogh. And I'm looking forward to them, and especially to Tony and Sharat, who are going to be my guests next week. They will talk about debriefing ET frameworks, and they will share some hints and tips with you to get the most of your debriefs. So please tune in next week. Thank you very much, Ash, for your talk.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure having you.
It was a pleasure.
And I'm really looking forward to see you in Potsdam in November.
Me too.
See you then. Bye.
Okay. Bye. Cheers.